I never expected the envelope to sting, but as I held it in my hands, fingers trembling slightly, I knew this wasn't just a wedding invitation, it was a reminder. A sharp, gold-foiled slap in the face wrapped in cream cardstock. My name was printed wrong. Not misspelled, no, that would have at least acknowledged me. It was addressed to Ms. Marie Holloway plus guest. Marie! That's my mother's middle name. Mine is Marissa. They never got it right. I sat at my kitchen table in my small apartment in Albany, the kind that creaks when you breathe too hard. The radiator clanked in the corner like it was annoyed for me. I stared at the RSVP card. There was a menu choice, a song request line, and a glittery little note saying, "Can't wait to celebrate this magical day with those who mean the most." Those who mean the most. I hadn't spoken to my sister Claire in 3 months. She hadn't called since our dad's funeral, when I stood alone by his casket and she clung to her husband in the front row like the lead in a Broadway tragedy. She didn't even glance my way during the eulogy, when I tried to say something about the man who spent more time at work than he ever did noticing me. Now she was getting married in Vermont, a vineyard wedding, gardenias and gold. And I was being summoned like some distant acquaintance who might bring a tolerable +1. Don't take it personally, my best friend Leah said over the phone that night, her voice crackling as she walked home from her shift at the ER. You know your family, they only remember you exist when they need a body for the photos. She was right, but it still hurt. I RSVP'd yes. Not because I wanted to go, because I needed to see it for myself. The pageantry, the pecking order, the lies wrapped in lace and champagne flutes. I needed the final proof that I was no longer delusional for feeling like a ghost in my own family. The morning of the wedding was stupidly beautiful. I drove up from Albany in my old Subaru, humming nervously along the back roads of Vermont. The sky was the kind of crisp blue you only get in May, and every tree seemed to whisper, "You don't belong here." I wore a dark emerald dress that made my skin glow but somehow felt like armor. I didn't pack an overnight bag. I knew I wouldn't stay long. The venue looked like a Pinterest board threw up all over it. White lanterns hung from the trees. There was a string quartet playing Coldplay like it was Beethoven. I checked in with the event coordinator, who scanned her list and paused. "Oh, you're Marissa," she said, blinking. I nodded. She looked down again, flustered. "Sorry, they listed you under... Never mind, you're in row 7, no +1 noted?" "No," I said, "it's just me." "Of course," she chirped, plastering on a smile. "Well, enjoy the ceremony." "Enjoy." I walked toward the white chairs with a knot forming in my throat. Everyone else moved like they belonged to the re-cousins I hadn't seen in years, laughing with glasses of rosé, uncles I barely knew slapping each other on the back. And then I saw her. Claire! My sister looked ethereal in her lace robe, posing for pre-ceremony photos near the gazebo. Her hair was swept into a low bun, her eyes framed by soft, smoky makeup. She was laughing. Not the laugh I remembered from childhood, loud and unfiltered, but something polished and light. A sound made for galleries and Instagram reels. When she saw me, her face didn't change, not even a twitch of surprise. "Marissa," she said coolly, walking over as if we'd just had brunch last week. "Claire," I replied, my voice drier than I intended. She hugged me lightly, barely touching. "You look nice." "Thanks, you look like a bridal catalog exploded on you." She laughed too quickly. "Still the same old wit." "Still the same old hierarchy," I muttered, before I could stop myself. Her brows lifted. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "Congrats, Claire." She stared at me a moment too long, and then, with a flick of her hand, she turned back to her bridesmaids. That moment stayed with me all through the ceremony. As she walked down the aisle on Mom's arm, Dad's absence noticeable only to me, I realized something quietly devastating. No one looked for me. Not once. No eyes darted my way, no camera panned to capture the forgotten sister, no whispered acknowledgments of my presence. I might as well have been the help. By the time we got to the reception, I had already begun building the wall in my mind. A fortress of old memories, sharp-edged moments, quiet exclusions, and bruises no one saw. It wasn't one thing, it was everything. The childhood talent shows where Claire got standing ovations, and I got told to clap louder, The way Mom called me high maintenance when I asked for anything. The time Dad forgot my high school graduation because he was traveling for a client. I was there, but I was never seen. I stayed for the first dance, watched them sway under fairy lights while everyone else smiled with moist eyes. And then, like the afterthought I'd always been, I slipped out the side gate, got in my car, and drove back down the dark Vermont road in silence. But something shifted in me that night. A voice I hadn't heard before stirred inside, a voice that didn't sound like a victim. It sounded like a woman ready to reclaim herself. To finally ask the questions I'd been swallowing for years. Why was I always the afterthought? What would happen if I stopped showing up? And who might I become if I let go of trying to earn love that was never meant for me? That was the night everything began to unravel. And the first night I felt awake. I didn't cry on the drive back. Not once. I thought maybe I would. After all, I'd just walked out of my sister's wedding, the family event of the decade. But instead of tears, there was just a strange quietness settling in my chest like fog rolling in over a lake. By the time I made it home to my apartment in Albany, it was almost 1 a.m. I kicked off my heels, peeled out of the emerald green dress, and crawled into bed without brushing my teeth. That's when the memories started flooding in. Not the pretty ones, not birthdays or snow days, the other ones, the ones that shaped me while everyone else was looking the other way. I was 8 the first time I realized my voice didn't matter. It was dinner time. Mom had made her famous chicken pot pie, the one Claire always asked for on her special days. We were seated around the scratched oak table in our house just outside Shroon Lake, Dad at the head, Mom to his right, Claire across from me, always with the better seat. The one where the ceiling light hit her hair just right. I remember telling a story about a science project I had done. I was excited I'd made a model of the solar system out of paper mache, and even the teacher had said it was impressive. So then I painted Jupiter with, I began. "Oh, Claire," Mom interrupted, laughing. "Did you tell your father about the honor roll assembly?" I paused. My mouth was still open, mid-sentence. Claire giggled. "Dad, guess what? I got all A's this term." Dad beamed. "That's my girl." And just like that, my planet project vanished into the void. I remember sitting there, staring at my untouched plate, while they clinked glasses of sparkling cider in her honor. No one noticed I stopped talking. No one asked what I was about to say. I learned then, if it's not shiny, it's not heard. Years later, in high school, I tried harder. I joined theater. Not because I loved it, but because Claire had done it and people paid attention when she was on stage. I thought maybe if I stood where she had stood, wore the same makeup, hit the same notes, someone might finally see me. But they didn't. When I landed the lead in our town, Mom didn't come to opening night. She said she had a migraine. Dad said he was stuck at the office. Claire sent a text that said, "Break a leg," with a winky face. She didn't show up either. Leah was there though, my best friend since 5th grade. She brought me a bouquet of sunflowers and hugged me so tightly after the final bow I almost cried. "They don't know what they're missing," she whispered, "but I do." I never told her how much that meant to me. I should have. Flash forward to my 20s. I went to college on a partial scholarship, stayed local so I could help out when Mom had her nervous spells. Claire went to Brown, got a full ride somehow. Mom called her the miracle child. I became the background support, the quiet fixer, the one who could be relied on to cancel trips, rearrange work shifts, do the late-night pharmacy runs when Mom's meds got messed up. No one said thank you. They just assumed I would. And the more I did, the less I was noticed. I think the real tipping point, the thing that scarred me quietly and permanently, was Dad's will. He died 3 years ago, heart attack in his sleep. It was sudden, and for a moment we were all leveled. Even Claire cried. Real tears for once. But the day we sat in that lawyer's office, everything changed. He left Claire the lake house, the vintage Corvette, the savings account. He left me his stamp collection, a dusty binder of postage squares he hadn't touched since the 90s. "I thought you always liked organizing things," Mom said with a shrug. Like I was a filing cabinet. No one asked how I felt. Not even Claire. Sitting in bed that night after her wedding, staring at the water stain on my ceiling, I realized something terrible. They had trained me to accept crumbs. Praise crumbs, attention crumbs, love crumbs. And I had been surviving off them for years. Because I thought that was all I deserved. I replayed every moment I'd buried, every dismissive glance, every dinner I cleared while Claire basked in applause, every voicemail that started with, "Hey, can you do me a favor?" I saw it now. Clear as daylight. This wasn't just neglect. It was emotional conditioning. They taught me to shrink so they could shine. And I let them. The next morning, I called Leah. She answered on the second ring, still groggy. "Please tell me you didn't end up crying in a vineyard bathroom." "No," I said. "Worse. I left before dessert." She whistled. "Damn, you okay?" "I think I'm finally seeing things clearly," I said, voice steadier than I expected. "And I think I want to stop chasing people who never clapped for me." There was a pause on the line. Then, "About damn time, Mar." We talked for an hour. About family, about memory, about what healing might even look like. And by the end of the call, I'd decided two things. I was going to stop waiting for an apology that would never come. I was going to start documenting everything. All the stories, all the slights. Not to wallow but to understand. To rebuild. Because healing wasn't just letting go. It was remembering fully and choosing yourself anyway. That afternoon, I pulled an old spiral notebook from the closet, one I used in college. On the first page, I wrote, "Things I was told to forget." And then I began to write. The chicken pot pie dinner. The theater play no one came to. The night Claire crashed Mom's car and blamed me and everyone believed her. The holidays I cooked and cleaned while she mingled. Each memory hit like a soft bruise I hadn't realized was still there. But with every page, I felt lighter, sharper, like I was finally honoring the parts of myself that had been silenced. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was reclamation. And I was just getting started. I used to fantasize about the moment it would happen. The perfect apology. Not just the words I imagined, the tone, the setting, the way her eyes would shimmer with real regret. Claire would come to me, tears brimming, voice low and broken. "Marissa, I'm so sorry. I see it now. I see what we did to you." Mom would be there too, maybe wringing her hands or clutching a handkerchief. "We didn't know, sweetie. We never meant to hurt you." And I would forgive them, gracefully, maybe with tears in my own eyes, maybe in a quiet coffee shop or during a rainstorm. Something cinematic. That fantasy carried me through more years than I care to admit. But now writing everything down in that spiral notebook, staring out the window of my tiny Albany kitchen as the leaves began to turn amber and gold, I knew that apology was never coming. Because to apologize, they would have to admit something. And to admit something, they'd have to see me as something more than a convenient scapegoat or emotional support staff. They'd have to see me as a person. 2 weeks after the wedding, Claire texted me. "Claire! Hey! Sorry we didn't get a chance to talk more at the reception. Everything was such a blur. Hope you had a good time, ID." I stared at the message for a long time. Didn't get a chance to talk more? We'd exchanged maybe 5 words. She didn't even ask if I'd made it home safely. Or why I left early. Or why I'd stood alone during half the reception. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed another one, deleted again. Finally, I settled on me. "Congrats again. I left after the first dance, needed some space, hope it was a good night." Her response came hours later. "Claire! Oh no, everything okay? You've always been so sensitive about stuff. You should have told me if something was wrong, you'd." There it was. "You've always been so sensitive." A phrase that had haunted me since I was 12. There was this one-time Thanksgiving, maybe 2007, when Claire told a story at the dinner table about how I'd peed my pants at summer camp. I was mortified. I'd begged her not to share it with anyone. She told it anyway. Everyone laughed. I ran to the bathroom, cheeks burning. When I came back, eyes still red, Mom leaned over and whispered, "Don't make a scene. You're too sensitive." Not, "That was cruel." Not, "Claire, apologize." Just, Don't make it worse by reacting. That phrase became a muzzle. Every time I felt humiliated, excluded, or hurt, it was my sensitivity that got blamed, not their actions, not their words. My feelings were inconvenient, therefore they were invalid. Now, sitting in my apartment, staring at that text from Claire, I felt the familiar burn of rage and grief rising in my chest. Not because she was cruel, but because she was so sure she hadn't done anything wrong. It would never occur to her that ignoring your sister's existence during your wedding might sting. That not checking in for months might mean something. That I wasn't too sensitive, I was just tired of being disposable. That weekend, I visited my mom. She still lived in the old house in Shroon Lake. The paint was peeling now, the porch sagging. She didn't answer the door when I knocked. I had to use the key she still kept in the plastic flower pot. She was in the living room, watching some reality show at full volume. "Oh, it's you," she said without looking up. "I brought soup," I said, holding up the paper bag. She nodded toward the kitchen. "You know where everything is." Same dance. Different day. I put the soup in the fridge, made us both tea, sat on the couch. We watched TV in silence for 15 minutes before I said, Claire texted me. "Oh, she and Jason are back from Maui. The pictures looked beautiful." She said I've always been too sensitive. Mom sipped her tea. "Well, you have, ever since you were little." My stomach clenched. Or maybe I've just been ignored a lot. Mom finally looked at me. "You always wanted so much attention. Claire never needed that." I almost laughed. Claire never needed attention because she was always given it. I swallowed the words. Instead, I asked, "Do you ever think you treated us differently?" She blinked. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one." She waved me off. "Claire was easier. You were emotional. I did my best. Let's not dredge up the past." "But the past made me," I whispered. "I'm not doing this with you, Marissa." And that was it. No apology. Just the usual deflection, the casual dismissal, the cold wall. I left after 20 minutes. On the drive home, I screamed in the car. Full-throated, raw, the kind of scream you only let out when you've been silenced too long. No music, no words, just sound. And then, after the scream, came the clarity. I had to stop expecting them to give me what they'd never given me before. Not because I didn't deserve it, but because they were incapable of giving it. When I got back to Albany, I opened my notebook again. This time, I wrote a different title at the top of the next page. Things I deserved that they never gave me. I made a list. An apology when I was hurt. Equal attention. Belief in my side of the story. Someone showing up to my play. A real birthday celebration after I turned 10. Eye contact when I was speaking. Not being compared to Claire in every way. The list went on. And with each bullet point, something inside me loosened. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't too sensitive. I was starved. Starved for recognition, for kindness, for validation. And now, I was done starving. That night, I started looking at jobs out of state. I'd worked as a copy editor for a mid-tier marketing firm for 5 years. It was comfortable, predictable, but something inside me craved change now. A new city, a new narrative. I clicked through listings in Denver, Portland, and Chicago. I even opened a blank Word doc and typed, "Dear Marissa, this is what happens when you stop waiting for people to love you right." It was the beginning of something. Not a plan yet, but a reckoning. And maybe, eventually, a rebirth. They say, the truth will set you free. But what they don't tell you is that before it frees you, it punches you in the stomach, knocks the wind out of you, and leaves you lying on the floor wondering if you'll ever breathe normally again. That was how it felt when I found out what Claire had done. It started innocently enough an email from a college friend, Natalie, someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 7 years. Subject line. "Hey, this is random, but..." Inside the message. "Hi, Marissa. I hope you're doing okay. I wasn't sure if I should even send this, but something came up in conversation last week and your name popped into my head. Do you remember back in senior year when you applied for that publishing internship in Boston at Morrison Tilson at? Well, I recently got lunch with a woman who used to work there. She mentioned reviewing applications back then and remembered a weird situation where someone's sister emailed them, asking them to drop a candidate. She didn't name names, but the timeline fits. I just wanted to say I'm so sorry if this is true. You always deserved more than you got. Take care. Natalie? I read it 3 times, then a 4th. My vision blurred, not from tears but from rage. Morrison, Tills. It had been my dream internship during senior year, a boutique publishing firm in Boston, small enough that I could get real editorial experience, big enough to be taken seriously. I'd worked on my application for weeks, edited and re-edited my personal statement, submitted writing samples, got glowing references from 2 professors. Then, out of nowhere, silence. No reply, no interview, no rejection email, just static. It crushed me at the time. I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I wasn't what they were looking for. I swallowed it and moved on, took a job proofreading product manuals at a tech startup in Albany. I never told anyone how that rejection haunted me. I chalked it up to bad timing. But now? Now there was another possibility. That Claire Me own sister sabotaged it. I didn't even realize I'd picked up my phone until it was ringing. Leah answered with a mouthful of granola. Hey, what's up? I read the email to her out loud. When I was done, there was silence. Marissa, holy hell! I don't want to believe it, I whispered. But Godit makes so much make sense. She always joked about me running off to play starving artist. She said Boston was too far, that I'd be abandoning the family. Do you think she really emailed them? Leah asked. I let out a shaky breath. I don't know, but I have to find out. That night, I dug through my old Gmail folders, searching for anything I'd saved from that application. There it was, a thread with internship@metpubroup.com. And tucked into my sent folder a follow-up I'd sent 2 weeks after submitting, asking for an update. No reply. I clicked on the email address, copied it, and sent a new message. Subject: Inquiry from former applicant 2016. Hello? I was an applicant for your editorial internship in 2016. I understand it's been years, but I'm reaching out to ask whether you might be able to confirm whether my application was reviewed or withdrawn. I recently heard something that suggested my candidacy may have been interfered with, and while I realize you may not be able to share details, I'd be grateful for any clarification. Thank you for your time. Marissa Holloway. I didn't expect a reply, but I got one. 3 days later. Subject: Re-inquiry from former applicant, 2016. Hi Marissa. Thank you for your message. While we can't disclose specific internal decisions, I can confirm that your application was among our top considerations that year. However, we did receive an email from a concerned relative suggesting that you might be under significant personal stress and not in an ideal position to commit to the internship. In hindsight, we regret not reaching out to verify that information directly. Best of luck in your endeavors. Linda Caro. Director Morrison and Tills Publishing. My hands went ice cold. Concerned relative. There was only one person who fit that description. Claire. I didn't call her. I didn't scream or send an angry text or storm her little suburban house in Bar, where she lived in a 3-story colonial with a wraparound porch and a golden retriever named Max. Instead, I sat very still on my couch. And then I opened my notebook. The day my sister stole my future. That's what I wrote at the top. Because that's what it was. It wasn't just an email. It was a decision. A choice to clip my wings because she was afraid I'd fly too far. And, maybe worse, because she didn't want to share the spotlight. She was always the accomplished one, the elegant one, the family gem. If I'd gotten that internship, if I'd moved to Boston, if I'd made a name for myself, then what? What would that have made her? I finally told Leah everything. We sat at our favorite diner, tucked into a booth by the window while it rained outside like the sky was grieving with me. She never even liked books, I said bitterly. She barely passed English. She doesn't care about books, Mar, Leah said softly. She cares about being the best at everything, or at least being seen that way. I can't confront her, I said. Not yet. No, Leah agreed. but you can stop pretending she didn't break something. That night, I started a new doc on my laptop. The Holloway files. A record of everything. Every lie, every stolen opportunity, every betrayal that had been brushed off, spun, minimized. I wasn't doing it to expose her. I was doing it to see myself clearly. To unearth the story I'd been buried under for so long. And as I typed, something strange happened. I stopped fantasizing about the perfect apology, because I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had the truth, and that was enough. If you had asked me what my breaking point would look like, I might have guessed something dramatic. Maybe Claire screaming at me during some family dinner, or Mom throwing a glass, or some kind of loud cinematic blowout. But no. My breaking point came quietly, wrapped in tinsel and fake cheer. It came on Christmas Eve. I hadn't planned to go home that year. I'd been circling the decision for weeks, debating, rationalizing, guilt-tripping myself. But after everything with the wedding, and then the email from Morrison Tills, and the cold, clinical confirmation that my own sister had sabotaged my future, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. Still, guilt is funny. It sneaks into your bones like cold air through a cracked window. So when Mom called 3 days before Christmas and said, "Are you really not coming? Claire and Jason are flying in from Vermont and Nana's asking for you," I caved. "Fine," I said, "but just for the day." The house looked the same as always. Same 2 blue icicle lights hanging crooked across the porch. Same artificial tree in the corner, lopsided from years of use. Same nativity scene on the mantel, the ceramic baby Jesus still missing an arm after Claire knocked it over in 7th grade. I stood in the hallway with my coat still on, staring at a photo of us on the wall, Claire in her prom dress, radiant. Me standing beside her, smiling tightly, wearing a borrowed gown 2 sizes too big. "You're here," Mom said, bustling in from the kitchen like she'd just remembered I existed. Claire followed. Makeup perfect, hair curled into soft waves. "Marissa," she said, air kissing my cheek, "you look tired." I smiled tightly. "I drove 4 hours through snow, Claire." "Well," she chirped, "at least you made it. That's what matters." Dinner was ham and scalloped potatoes and forced small talk. Jason talked about their new patio renovation, Mom bragged about the new baking club she joined, Claire complained about supply chain issues with her Etsy candle business. No one asked about my job. No one asked how I was doing. I was invisible. Again. Then came the gift exchange. We sat in the living room, the fire crackling too loudly, everyone clutching mugs of cider like extras in a Hallmark movie. Jason gave Claire a bracelet from Tiffany's. Claire gave Mom a weekend spa package. Mom gave Jason a leather wallet. Then, she handed me a box. It was light. I opened it. Inside, a secondhand self-help book with a cracked spine and a sticky note that read, "Thought this might help you get out of your funk. Love, Mom." The book? "Why You're Always So Sensitive. How to Stop Being a Burden." I stared at the title. Then at her. Then at Claire, who had the audacity to smirk. That's when something in me snapped. I stood up slowly, holding the book. Do you hear yourselves?" I said, my voice calm but shaking. Mom blinked. "What?" "This," I said, holding up the book. "This is what you give me? After everything?" "It's meant to be helpful," Mom said stiffly. "You've always been too sensitive," I finished for her. "Right, of course." I turned to Claire, "And you knew about the internship." Her smirk faltered. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me." "I don't know what you think you know," she said, suddenly sounding less sure of herself. I stepped closer. "You wrote that email to Morrison Tills. You told them I wasn't stable enough, that I couldn't handle it." Jason looked confused. "Claire?" Claire's eyes darted. I was protecting her. She wasn't ready. She would have failed and come crawling back. And Mom. "I didn't ask you to protect me," I said louder now. "I needed you to believe in me, just once." "You're being dramatic," Mom snapped. "This is Christmas. Let's not do this here." I turned slowly to her. "Do what? Tell the truth? Name what's been happening for 28 years? Mom's face turned cold. "You always find a way to ruin the mood, Marissa." No, I said. You ruin it every time you choose her. Every time you pretend I don't exist unless it's convenient. Every time you call my boundaries attitude and my silence selfishness. I took a breath. This is the last time I'm coming here. Silence. Complete and absolute. Jason looked like he wanted to disappear. Claire opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Mom stared at me like she didn't recognize the woman in front of her. And maybe she didn't. Because I wasn't the same. I wasn't begging anymore. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing for existing. I turned and walked to the door, grabbing my coat. No one followed me. Outside, snow had started falling. Big, soft flakes that melted on my cheeks. I stood in the driveway for a moment, breathing in the cold night air, letting the silence settle around me like a warm blanket. I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Back in Albany, I didn't cry. I didn't journal. I didn't even call Leah. I just exhaled. That was the moment it ended. The people-pleasing. The hope. The fantasy of a family that would love me the way I needed. I started planning. Not revenge. Just a new life. Somewhere far. Somewhere I could grow without being pruned. Denver, maybe? Or Portland? Someplace with bookstores and mountains and air that didn't carry the scent of old guilt? I applied for 2 jobs that night. I didn't tell anyone, and it felt amazing. Leaving didn't happen all at once. It started in the corners of my life, the little things I began detaching from. Weekly check-in texts with Mom that I used to initiate? Gone. The guilt-fueled drive to like Claire's curated Instagram posts of sunsets and handmade candles? Muted. I stopped volunteering information, stopped showing up to be ignored. Instead, I poured myself into my job search. By late January, I had 3 interviews lined up. One of them an editorial manager role at a mid-sized publishing company in Denverlet. Something inside me that I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, bone-deep hope. Not the kind that waits for someone to choose you, the kind that chooses itself. When the offer came through, I didn't tell anyone right away. I just sat there in my apartment, staring at the screen, hands pressed to my mouth like I was holding in a scream or a prayer. The email subject line read, "Offer from Brightspire Publishing." The number was more than I made now. The role was bigger. The city? New, untouched, untainted by old ghosts. I said yes, and then I started planning my escape. I didn't tell Claire. I didn't tell Mom. I didn't even tell Leah until I had signed the lease on a small but sun-drenched apartment in Capitol Hill. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a reading nook under a wide window that faced the mountains. I leave in 3 weeks, I said over coffee, my voice quiet but steady. Leah blinked. Holy shit. I smiled. I know. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Marissa, you're finally doing it. You're finally putting yourself first. I whispered, for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of what happens when I stop being useful to them. Of course, word eventually got out. It was Claire who found out first. She called me on a random Wednesday. Denver, she blurted as soon as I picked up. What do you mean you're moving to Denver? I kept my tone even. It's a new job, a really good one. And you didn't think to tell us? Would it have changed anything if I had? There was a pause. Then, you're being dramatic. There it was again, that old tune, familiar as a lullaby. You're too sensitive, you're being dramatic, you're making it about you. But I didn't flinch. I'm leaving in 2 weeks, I said. I've already packed most of my things. I don't need permission, Claire, and I'm not asking for approval. Her voice cracked a little. You're really just going to leave? I already did, I said softly. You just didn't notice. Mom called the next day. You're really doing this? She said. You're just abandoning your family? I laughed. Quiet. Bitter. You can't abandon what never claimed you. Oh, come on, don't be cruel. I'm not being cruel, I said. I'm being clear. I spent my entire life shrinking to fit into this family. I'm done. What about me? She asked, and that hit me harder than I wanted to admit. You'll be fine, I said gentler now. You've always had Claire. You're overreacting. No, I replied. I'm finally reacting. And I hung up. My last week in Albany was peaceful. I walked my favorite neighborhoods one last time, had one final breakfast at the diner with Leah, donated bags of old clothes and books, packed everything I loved into cardboard boxes, and said goodbye to everything else. The day I left, it snowed. Thick, slow flakes that turned the city quiet. I loaded my car with the essentials. Everything else was being shipped. Then I stood in the middle of my empty apartment, took one last breath, and whispered, "Thank you for being the place I learned to survive." And then I closed the door behind me. Driving west across the country alone was something I once would have feared. But with every passing mile, I felt the weight of old expectations peel off like dead skin. The girl who once begged for a text back, who contorted herself into silence so others could have the stage, who took the smallest seat at every table, she was dissolving in the rearview mirror. I arrived in Denver 5 days later. My new apartment was waiting bright, open, filled with the smell of fresh paint and possibility. I didn't cry when I stepped inside. I smiled. Because for the first time in my entire life, this space belonged to me. No family shadows on the walls, no passive-aggressive remarks echoing in the kitchen, just my voice, my choices, my story. And it was only just beginning. Revenge used to be something I pictured, like a courtroom speech or a dramatic takedown, something big, something loud, something final. But in Denver, I learned that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't confrontation, it's elevation. It's rising so far above what they expected of you that they can't even see you clearly anymore. The first week in my new apartment, I kept waking up at 5:00 a.m. Not from anxiety for once, but from something else. Peace. I would lie there in the half-light, listening to the city slowly wake up around me, the hum of a bus, a dog barking 3 floors down, a kettle whistling somewhere nearby, and I would just breathe. No one was going to knock on my door demanding something. No one was going to call and guilt-trip me into attending brunch. No one was going to talk over me, twist my words, or laugh at my pain. For the first time in my life, my time was my own. Brightspire Publishing turned out to be everything I hoped for and more. My manager, Aisha, was sharp and generous. The team respected my ideas. I got to work on real manuscripts, help develop voices, nurture new writers. I was seen. And not because I begged for it. Because I showed up fully as myself. On my 32nd birthday, something incredible happened. A debut novel I'd worked on from pitch to publication hit the indie bestseller list. My name was in the acknowledgments bold and clear. To Marissa Holloway, my editor and emotional compass, thank you for believing in me when I didn't know how. I stared at the words, my coffee going cold in my hands. Claire had never written a sentence like that to me. Mom had never spoken those words. But here they were, from a stranger, from someone who chose to see me. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Because this was it. This was my quiet revenge. Months passed. I settled into the rhythms of a new life. Morning yoga at the park. Friday, trivia nights with my coworkers. Sundays spent at a used bookstore near Capitol Hill, where the owner learned my name by week 3. I started dating again. Slowly, cautiously. Not because I needed to fill a void, but because for the first time, I wasn't looking for someone to save me. I'd already saved myself. And then, out of nowhere, came the group text. Family chat. Claire, Mom, me. Claire, just wanted to let you both know Jason and I are expecting. Due in November. The photo attached showed Claire beaming with a tiny ultrasound in hand. I stared at the message, then turned off my phone. 3 days later, Claire called. I let it go to voicemail. She left one. Hey, I know you saw the news. I'd really like to talk. I feel like we've been distant, and I want my child to know her aunt. Call me? I didn't call her back. I didn't block her either. I just let the silence hang. That was the thing about healing. You don't always need to scream, no. Sometimes, silence is the boundary. In mid-June, Brightspire flew me out to New York for Book Expo. I stood in a room full of agents, writers, and editors, sipping champagne and talking shop. Across the ballroom, I saw an old classmate from college, someone who used to ask about Claire every time we bumped into each other. But when she saw me this time, she smiled wide and said, "Marissa, I've heard your name 3 times this week. You're killing it." And something clicked in my chest. Not pain, not longing, but pride. Real, solid pride. That night, back in my hotel room, I wrote a letter. Not to send, just to release. Dear Claire, you lied about me, you shrank me, you erased me every chance you got. But I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for your apology. I'm not holding my breath for recognition. Because I've finally built a life where I don't need your permission to exist. I hope your child grows up in a home where love isn't conditional, where voices are heard without needing to shout, where no one is forced to become invisible to keep the peace. I will not be part of that home, but I do hope it's better than the one we knew. I'm not bitter. I'm free. Marissa. I folded the letter, slid it into the hotel nightstand, left it there when I checked out. Back in Denver, summer settled in like a warm breath. I filled my evenings with walks, dinner parties, and manuscript notes scrawled in pencil margins. Sometimes I'd get texts from Mom. "Hope you're well. Claire's baby shower is in October." I never replied. Not because I hated them. Because I finally loved me enough to choose peace over proximity. The best revenge? It wasn't dramatic. It was waking up every day without dread. It was signing an author who reminded me of myself and watching her bloom. It was smiling at my reflection and recognizing the woman I had become. It was knowing that I would never again sit at a table where I had to beg to be fed emotionally. I had built my own table, and it was full. There's a moment quiet, barely noticeable when you realize you're no longer who you used to be. It doesn't come with fireworks or music swelling in the background. It doesn't come when you expect it. For me, it came in the form of a mirror and a little black dress. It was late September. Brightspire was hosting a private gala for their fall authors. Nothing huge, just a rooftop gathering at a boutique hotel downtown, with fairy lights strung overhead and a playlist full of soft jazz and indie folk. Aisha told me to dress up. So I did. I bought the dress 2 weeks earlier, simple, elegant, sleeveless, black satin with a low, square neckline and a slit up the leg that felt bold in a way I hadn't dared before. It hugged me in all the places I used to try to hide. I slipped it on, curled my hair, swiped on red lipstick I hadn't worn since college. And then I looked in the mirror. Really looked. At first, all I saw were the things I used to critique. The curve of my stomach, the faint shadows under my eyes, the birthmark on my shoulder that Claire once called distracting. But then, something shifted. I leaned closer, tilted my head, and I saw her. Me. Not the version my family had cast me as the quiet one, the bitter one, the afterthought, but the woman I had become. Strong, still, radiant. And then, unexpectedly, I started to cry. Not the messy sobs of pain, but the tears that come when you finally see someone you've been searching for, and realize it was you all along. The gala was beautiful. I stood under the string lights with a glass of wine, laughing with writers I admired, colleagues I respected. At one point, Aisha took my arm and said, "I hope you know how good you are at this, Marissa. Not just the work, the way you see people, the way you hold space for their stories." I blinked at her, surprised. "Thank you." "No, really," she said. "Some people just do the job. You honor it." That night, walking home in heels that pinched and a heart that felt twice its size, I kept replaying those words in my head. Honor. That was what I had always craved from my family, not gifts, not status, just recognition, acknowledgement that I mattered. And I finally had it. From people who saw me because I let myself be seen. 2 weeks later, Claire called again. I didn't pick up. She texted the next day. "Claire, I had the baby. Her name is Caroline. She has my eyes. I think you'd love her. Please, don't shut me out forever." I stared at the screen. The girl who used to crave that message would have dropped everything to respond, would have jumped on a plane, would have held the baby and pretended the past didn't exist just for a chance to be let in. But the woman I had become? She read the message, breathed, and did not reply. Instead, I opened my notebook again, the one I'd carried with me all the way from Albany, the one titled Things I Was Told to Forget. I flipped to a blank page, and I wrote, Things I remember now on purpose. I made it out. I am allowed to take up space. I do not need permission to be full of joy. I am no longer starving for scraps. I am allowed to not go back. I am allowed to heal without witnesses. I am allowed to be whole even if they never see it. That weekend, I went hiking alone. There's a trail just outside Boulder, high up in the Flatirons, where the air feels thinner and the sky seems impossibly wide. At the summit, I sat on a rock and looked out over everything hazy foothills, glimmering rooftops in the distance, and the winding path that led me here. And I thought about that girl at the wedding, the one who stood in the shadows, the one who slipped out the side gate without dessert, the one who was breaking inside and didn't know if she had the right to say so. I closed my eyes. I see you now, I whispered. And for the first time, I think she heard me. It wasn't planned. I didn't wake up that morning thinking, today's the day I finally confront them. But life has a way of bringing things full circle, whether you're ready or not. It was a Sunday in October. I was making butternut squash soup me New Denver ritual when my phone buzzed. I expected it to be Leah, or maybe an author needing edits. But it was Mom. Voicemail. My stomach tensed. I hadn't heard her voice in months. For a moment, I considered deleting it without listening. But something told me, press play. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. Hi, Marissa. It's your mother. I know we haven't spoken, but I wanted to tell you that Nana passed this morning. Peacefully, in her sleep. The service is this Friday, Claire thought you should know. She's handling the arrangements. A pause. I know things have been tense, but she asked if you'd come. We both did. Maybe it's time. Maybe you could come home. Home. That word hit me like glass breaking. I didn't decide right away. I stared at the message for 2 days. Thought about the years of silence, the lies, the favoritism, the time Claire ruined my dream job, the Christmas Eve with the self-help book wrapped like a gift. But also, I thought about Nana. She wasn't perfect, but she was kind. She used to send me handwritten notes when I was in college, called me her quiet little oak tree, said I was strong, even when no one noticed. So, Friday morning, I boarded a flight to Albany. Not for Mom, not for Claire. For closure. The funeral was held at the same church where Dad's service had been. I sat in the back, wore a simple black coat. No one noticed me come in. The service was short, sweet, gentle, just like Nana would have wanted. A few hymns, a reading, Claire standing at the podium in a dove-gray dress, her voice trembling in all the right places. I watched her carefully. She cried. People comforted her. No one looked for me. Afterward, I stood outside by the trees, away from the crowd. Autumn leaves swirled at my feet. The air was sharp and clean. And then, Mom appeared. Marissa, she said, like she wasn't sure if it was really me. Hi. She looked older than I remembered. Her eyes were puffy, her lipstick smudged. I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't. She nodded slowly. Thank you for showing up. I didn't say, you're welcome. I just looked at her and waited. She sighed. Claire's inside, helping the pastor. She's been really strong. I raised an eyebrow. Of course she has. Mom winced. I guess you still think I only ever saw her. I didn't answer. Instead, I said, did you know about the internship? That she interfered? She blinked. What? At Morrison Tills. In college, she wrote them. Told them I was unstable, that I wasn't ready. Her mouth parted slightly. That's not true. It is. I didn't. She looked genuinely stunned. She never told me that. I nodded. And you never asked. Silence. Then, I suppose, I failed you. I crossed my arms. You chose not to see me. That wasn't an accident. That was convenient. Her lips trembled. I didn't know how to love you the way you needed. I didn't need more than I deserved, I said. I just needed enough. She looked down. You always seemed so strong. No, I replied, I seemed so quiet. She started to cry. I didn't comfort her. I didn't hug her. I let her feel it. Because, for once, her pain wasn't my responsibility. I was turning to leave when I saw Claire standing near the church steps. She looked right at me. I walked over slowly. She didn't smile. Surprised you came, she said. I'm not here for you. She nodded once. Fair. A long pause passed between us. Then she said, Mom told me you found out about the internship. I said nothing. She swallowed. I was scared of losing control, of you being better, of being forgotten. I already was forgotten, I said, and I was still rooting for you. Tears welled up in her eyes. I don't know how to fix it. You can't. She blinked. So what happens now? I looked at her, really looked. And then I said the truth I hadn't known I'd been carrying. Nothing happens now. You live your life. I live mine. You name your daughter after our grandmother and hope you break the pattern, and I keep moving forward. Claire looked devastated, but also freed. Will I ever see you again? I shook my head. I hope not. Not cruel. Just final. That night, I flew home to Denver. When I landed, I turned my phone back on. A message from Leah waited. Leah, you okay? Did you get what you needed? I stared at the screen for a second, then replied. Me. Yeah, I did. It's done. Denver felt different the moment I got off the plane. Not because the city had changed, but because I had. My shoulders sat lower, my jaw unclenched. My mind, so often buzzing with old scripts and phantom guilt, was finally quiet. I wasn't rehearsing comebacks anymore. I wasn't playing courtroom prosecutor in my head, replaying everything they said, trying to find new angles for forgiveness or blame. That part of my life had ended. And what came next? Peace. The first real sign of that peace came a few days after the funeral, when I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of mint tea and looked at the small potted plant on my windowsill. It was a fiddle leaf fig I'd picked up on a whim when I first moved in. At the time, it was barely surviving, just 2 wilted leaves, browning at the edges. But now, it had 5 broad green leaves and a new sprout pushing upward. I hadn't even realized how well it was growing. Just like me. I started doing things slowly, intentionally. Long walks in the crisp morning air, journaling without trying to solve anything, making meals that took time, roasting, simmering, steeping like feeding myself was no longer an afterthought. I created a Sunday ritual, unplug everything, cook something new, and read on the floor in the sunlight. Not because I had to, but because I could. One morning, I found the old notebook again. Things I was told to forget. I flipped through the pages. The early entries sharp with pain, thick with memory. The moments that used to pierce me now felt like faded scars. They no longer bled. They just existed. At the back of the notebook, there was one blank page left. So I wrote, things I forgive, even if they never apologize. Forgetting my birthday. Blaming me for Claire's mistakes. Never showing up to my play. Undermining my dreams. Making me believe I had to earn love. Only calling when they needed something. Not knowing how to love me. Not trying. And then I wrote one last thing. I forgive myself for waiting so long. I closed the notebook gently and tucked it away in a drawer. Not erased. Just archived. Leah visited in early November. We hiked in Boulder, drank too much cider, and stayed up watching old movies on my couch. One night, over takeout, she said, "You seem different, lighter." "I am." She smiled. "You're glowing, like genuinely glowing. I almost don't recognize you." I laughed softly. That's the thing, I finally recognize me. I never reconnected with Claire. She sent a Christmas card with a photo of the baby, no note. I didn't send one back. Not to be cruel. To be clear, I didn't owe her access just because we shared blood. Family is more than genetics. It's presence, it's effort, it's choice. And I was finally choosing me. In January, I stood on the rooftop of my apartment building after a snowstorm, watching the sun rise over the mountains. I wrapped my coat tighter, sipped hot coffee from my travel mug, and felt the cold kiss my cheeks. And I whispered something I hadn't said out loud in years. Something that had once felt impossible. I'm proud of you. Not to impress anyone. Not to convince myself. Just as truth. This story doesn't end with applause. Or a big reunion. Or revenge served on a silver platter. It ends in a quiet apartment in a city that feels like home, with a woman who once begged to be seen, finally seeing herself. Whole. Worthy. Free.